Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining City Parks Alliance for this webinar. We're going to be exploring the roles that land trusts can play in the development of new parks, trails, and green spaces in communities, in particular cities. I'm Kathy Blaha, and I'm President and Parks Partnership Advisor at Kathy Blaha Consulting, and I'm going to be moderating today's discussion. If you're interested in continuing education credits for this webinar for AICP or LACES, watch for a follow-up email in the next 2 days with instructions on how to claim your credits. On behalf of City Parks Alliance, we would like to thank the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for their sponsorship of the 2020 funding webinar series. Collaborative partnerships have always been a critical element in moving park projects forward, but with parks and recreation agencies facing budget cuts as a result of the pandemic, it's become more important than ever to leverage partnerships to get projects started and to see them through to completion. By partnering with land trusts and leveraging their special abilities and their special expertise in areas such as legal work, fundraising, community engagement, real estate transactions, communities can take advantage of this expertise and advance projects that increase access to green space and recreational opportunities at a time when it's needed most. Today, we're going to hear from 4 speakers who are doing this kind of innovative work at 3 land trusts around the country. They'll talk about how they pursue funding for their projects, how they partner with agencies and other organizations in their work, and how they focus on equity to create meaningful community engagement processes that engage residents from concept all the way through stewardship. With us today are Kelly McCarthy. She's the Urban Conservation Projects Coordinator, and Isaac Robb, the Director of Urban Projects, both with the Thriving Communities Program at the Western Reserve Land Conservancy in Cleveland, Ohio. Also with us is Carolyn Buck, Red Rock Trail System Director at the Freshwater Land Trust in Birmingham, Alabama, and Jonathan Pacheco Bell, Program Manager at the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust in LA. So we're going to hear from all 4 of our presenters and 3 case studies before moving into Q&A. To ensure we can respond to everyone as questions or technical difficulties arise, here are some tips. To ask a question, click the questions icon on your screen, type the question in the box, and click send. Feel free to send questions throughout the presentations. We'll be collecting them and holding them until the end. If you experience a technical problem, please type it in the question box and send that to us as well, and we'll try to solve that for you. And if you miss something, don't worry. Links to the presentations, the recording, and related resources will be emailed to all registrants shortly after the webinar. So let's get started. Kelly and Isaac, let's begin with you guys.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you for your time and attention today while my colleague Kelly McCarthy and I discuss the planning and funding of our Brighton Park project in Cleveland, Ohio. As mentioned, my name is Isaac Robb, and Kelly and I work for the Thriving Communities Program, which is an urban program of Western Reserve Land Conservancy. In 2006, Western Reserve Land Conservancy was created by the largest ever merger of land trusts in the United States. 8 Northern Ohio land trusts voluntarily joined forces to form a private, nonprofit conservation organization for a region that stretches across the entirety of northeastern Ohio and covers a 17-county footprint. And we have a staff fluctuating around 45 people. To date, we've protected 787 properties and well over 60,000 total acres. The Land Conservancy's strengths are born out of a traditional land protection model. As a land trust, we are better suited for stewardship than ownership. We wouldn't be able to protect tens of thousands of acres if we had to own and maintain our entire portfolio. However, northeastern Ohio is fortunate to have a robust and well-funded county park district network. When the Land Conservancy formed out of the merger, we recognized the existing capacity to own and maintain parks locally and saw an opportunity to add more land into the public realm with our transactional expertise. This includes a full legal team, as well as our fundraising strengths through both our public funding team as well as our private development team. This allows us to negotiate and fundraise for acquisitions with a strong takeout partner for local long-term management. Not many land trusts have such a large urban focus, but when our Thriving Communities program was created, a commitment was made to expand the mission of the land trust into areas where healthy places and park spaces are at a premium. We strive to build community with land as our medium. In the wake of the foreclosure crisis, vacant and abandoned property became a focal point for our region as our population continues to shrink. The result are neighborhoods that were designed and developed with a much larger population in mind, but now have to contend with vacant land on many of our residential blocks, as well as a diminished tax base. Through the strategies outlined on this slide, we continue to strive towards environmental equity, which we believe is a prerequisite for human equality. I would also like to emphasize our work with land banks. To date, we've helped to establish 58 county land banks throughout Ohio and have raised over $400 million to address vacant and abandoned residential property in the state. However, today we are focusing on Brighton Park, a project that exemplifies how our strengths are leveraged in an urban context. As our organization continues to grow and evolve, there are projects that add significant public benefit that did not have a willing or able takeout partner. With our added capacity and expertise, we have created a signature Parks and Preserve program, which allows us to own and manage key properties, as we will demonstrate today with Brighton Park. My colleague Kelly will now discuss the history of the project and the Land Conservancy's ongoing involvement.
Great, thank you, Isaac. So Brighton Park, this property here, was formerly known as the Henninger landfill. It's a 25-acre construction and demolition debris landfill in the Cleveland neighborhood of Old Brooklyn. The site has been relatively stagnant since the 1990s, and in the mid-2000s, it began to be viewed as a really critical acquisition component of many neighborhood green space plans and regional trail network plans due to its potential linkage for the Metro Park Zoo and headquarters, as well as Brookside Reservation here to the west, and Harmony Park and the Towpath Trail via the Treadway Creek Trail to the east. The Towpath Trail is an important regional trail network project that connects Cleveland through to south of Akron. This regional trail hosts 2.5 million people annually and is over 100 miles of contiguous off-road trails. So it really is a tremendous resource for our community, and linking neighborhoods to it through smaller neighborhood trail networks has been a huge priority. So among the plans that identify this Brighton Park property as a future green space were the Emerald Necklace Centennial Plan, Cuyahoga County Greenway Plan, Lower Big Creek Greenway Redevelopment and Restoration Plan, and the Old Brooklyn Community Development Corporation's Master Plan. And all of this is just to say, or just to demonstrate, how this was really a complex and yet critical project that groups, including the City of Cleveland, Cleveland Metro Parks, and Old Brooklyn CDC really wanted to see accomplished, but due to a variety of factors, including an absentee landowner and the potential contamination of the property, none of the interested parties were really able to take it on. So the Land Conservancy, with a staff experienced in complex land transactions, as Isaac mentioned, was able to get involved and fill some of the gaps that were really impeding progress on this project. Here is sort of a timeline of the history of the property and our involvement with it. So from the 1940s to the 1980s, the property was operated both officially and unofficially as a landfill, receiving construction and demolition debris from projects such as the construction of Highway I-71. And then, although the landfill officially did close in 1987, debris from the demolition of Municipal Stadium in the 90s was deposited here as well. So this site really does, in this way, contain a lot of Cleveland's history. The property then housed a popular neighborhood attraction called Kafari's Go-Karts through the 80s and 90s, but then after the closure of that facility, the property remained unused for many years. And then it was in the mid-2000s, as I discussed earlier, that it really began to be identified as a priority for a variety of stakeholders. The Land Conservancy got involved in the project in 2012 at the request of both Old Brooklyn Community Development Corporation and an adjacent landowner familiar with the Land Conservancy's work. This site was actually something of a dream project for our boss, the Director of Thriving Communities, Jim Rackauckas, who served as a council person for this neighborhood for many years and actually grew up in a nearby neighborhood and remembers playing around this landfill as a kid. It then took 3 years of negotiations with the landowner and then fundraising for and conducting the environmental assessments that were part of the due diligence required for the acquisition of this kind of property, and then, of course, fundraising for the actual acquisition as well, before the Land Conservancy was able to buy the property in 2015. The assessments on the property did identify a small area of soil that did need to be remediated due to the presence of some chemicals of concern, but fortunately this was relatively minimal and we were able to successfully remediate that in 2016. And this was the final step in Ohio EPA's voluntary action program, which then removed liability from the Land Conservancy on the basis of the fact that all the required assessments and remediation had been completed to ensure that the property would be safe for its future use as a recreational facility. And in the meantime, from 2018 well into this year, we fundraised for the construction of the park improvements and the ecological restoration that we have planned for the property. Construction of the trails began just last month, and we're hoping for it to be ready for public use later this fall. The restoration component of the project, which we consider phase 2, is currently in the planning stages and will be implemented next year pending Ohio EPA approval of the proposed activities. And one lesson that we did learn here is that we really ought to have budgeted for the surprisingly large expense of both time and resources that were required for the preparation and submission of requests for the very technical Rule 513 process through Ohio EPA, which regulates any ground disturbing activity on a landfill whatsoever, including even just digging a hole to plant a tree, as we've learned through this process. Here's a conceptual map of the phase 1 park improvements, which will include over 2,000 linear feet of ADA accessible all-purpose trail through the center of the property, and then 3,000 feet of natural surface walking trails around the perimeter, as well as a parking lot and an overlook that will feature views of the skyline over Big Creek in the Industrial Valley. The restoration component is not pictured here, but it will involve the planting of hundreds of native trees, restoring native meadow habitat throughout the property, treating invasive species, and installing some green infrastructure near the parking lot, of course, all pending Ohio EPA approval. This next slide just sort of demonstrates all of the various funding sources that have gone into each phase of this project. So as you can see, there were a lot of different public funds from all levels of government that have gone into various phases of the project, from county funds to state dollars and federal dollars as well. And these are all of the philanthropic funds that have supported the project over the year, raised, as Isaac mentioned, by our development team. These have supported every single phase of the project, either as last money in for completing a particular phase, or as matching funds for a public grant, or to cover costs associated with the operation and long-term maintenance of the property. And one thing I do really want to emphasize here is just how complex a process it has been getting all of these different funds to work together in terms of navigating and fundraising for the matching requirements of the public grants, and then getting the grant periods of performance to overlap with each other, understanding compliance requirements and reporting requirements, which are of course different for each grant. And all of that is to say that this really has been a quite involved process. So having a dedicated public funding team and a development team who really understands how to navigate these processes has been absolutely crucial for our success. And with that, I will turn it back over to Isaac.
Thank you, Kelly. An additional component that is crucial to the success of this project has been the unique expertise that all of our partners have brought to the table. While the Land Conservancy was best suited to negotiate the acquisition and fundraise for all the various components that Kelly mentioned, Cleveland Metro Parks provided the construction management experience that we as a land trust just haven't developed. They handled the contract bidding and are currently overseeing construction of the trail and park infrastructure. The Metro Parks will also manage the property in the long term, while the Land Conservancy will retain fee simple ownership. This ensures that Brighton Park will have the level of care and maintenance of any Metro Park, which has a sterling reputation in our region. The Old Brooklyn Community Development Corporation has also been a key partner in terms of coordinating community engagement and visioning efforts on the early stages of the project through meetings with adjacent residents, and even applying for one of the grants used for the improvements. In Cleveland, we're really fortunate to have a robust network of community development corporations that exist in all of our neighborhoods, and they are a critical partner to all of our urban work, not just with this project. We've also worked with various social service organizations to help navigate a rather delicate part of this project, which was the fact that there were actually a handful of individuals that were experiencing homelessness and had been living on the property for some time. So we worked with many local partners to help offer relocation assistance and more permanent housing solutions to those who desired it. And finally, the support of Cleveland City Council has been instrumental. Cleveland City Council supports a lot of our work in the city, and Councilman Brancatelli in particular, whose ward this project is located in, has been a true champion of the project from the very beginning. While these partnerships are critical to the overall success of the project, Without the leadership from the Land Conservancy, as well as the risk tolerance of our board, the neighborhood would still be longing for something positive to be done with this property. I strongly encourage those of you listening to partner with organizations like ours to do the dirty work of the acquisition and restoration of difficult projects like this. We are proud to announce that as of August, even with all the difficulties surrounding COVID-19, whether it be from getting regulatory approvals, finalizing our grant agreements, getting the necessary permitting, or whatever maybe has come our way, construction is actually underway. We are really looking forward to completing phase 1 this fall, and we'll continue the restoration work and tree planting that Kelly mentioned next spring. So with that, we hope that you'll come visit our park and experience our incredible trail system the next time you find yourself in Cleveland. This truly is a quintessential Cleveland project, and I appreciate your time and listening to us today.
Great story, you guys. Great case study and very complex. It really shows the value you guys brought to the project. Next, we're going to hear about the Freshwater Land Trust work in Birmingham. Carolyn, you're up.
Great. Hi, guys. My name is Carolyn Buck. I work for the Freshwater Land Trust in Birmingham, Alabama. And we are a traditional land trust, and our tagline, we say, is that we conserve land and we build trails. And so our organization was founded in 1996 with the idea of being a land trust that focuses on conserving lands that protect water quality, habitat, and then later we started focusing on recreational access. And we work in a fairly small footprint. We have an 8-county footprint that we do our conservation work in. And what that has enabled us to do, we're a much smaller land trust than some of our neighbors around us. It's allowed us to be very strategic in terms of partnerships and conservation and projects that we take on. And so we've built some really long-lasting, really helpful partnerships that have been critical not only for our conservation work, but also for our trail work as we started kind of shifting our work in that direction. And this really came about, our trail work, in 2012 because we realized there was a big divide between residents and the natural environment and how they were interacting with it. In the Southeast, we have a lot of open land, and so it's not necessarily something that people consider often on their daily day-to-day basis. And so we really wanted to look at ways that we could reintroduce people to the natural environment. And so we thought of this idea of a master trail system. It's 750 miles of proposed trails that would make sure that every resident in Jefferson County, which is the most populous area in our footprint, had access to a green space within 1 mile of their home. And what that looks like is about 47% of our plan really is focused on community parks and trails and hiking trails and mountain biking trails. And then the rest of the system is looking at ways that we can incorporate sidewalks and bike lanes to make sure that people have access to those green spaces. We really wanted green space to be equitable no matter where you lived in the county or your income bracket and what transportation options you had. And so we created this plan in 2012, and it was always our idea that community involvement would be the cornerstone of the Red Rock project. So we created this plan over 2 years with intensive community involvement. We had over 3,000 people help contribute. We gave people maps of their community and told them to draw places where they wanted to see parks and trails. And that was all compiled together to create our master plan, which serves as our blueprint. And 750 miles is a lot to put your hands around. And so we work on prioritizing projects in 2 different ways. So sometimes we are approached as a land trust with potential land that we could acquire or new grant opportunities, or a civic organization that's looking to do a community project. And they'll come to us and ask us what type of trail project could fit this unique opportunity. And so we'll go back to the master plan and kind of pick out something that we think might fit the criteria that they're looking for. Another way we do it is a city or a community or a group will come to us and say that they really want to see a certain trail or park project in their town, and they'll ask us to help them along with that. And so once we kind of get this idea of a project that we want to work on, we again go back to the community and get their input to make sure that the community as a whole is still interested in this project, and it's not just one or two people in that community that are driving the process. And so I will say, if you guys don't know your local land trust and are looking for ways to break in, we get cold calls all the time, and we cold call other people just to find out what kind of opportunities are out there. So I highly encourage just reach out to your local land trust and open the conversation because you might find that there is an opportunity that they're working on, or they can connect you to somebody to make it happen. And so the Freshwater Land Trust, we consider ourselves facilitators of trail building. We do not own or operate or maintain any of our trails or parks after we build them. And so that means that we are very interested in creating lasting and strong partnerships with the municipalities that we're working with. So we are very active and have very good relationships with parks and rec departments, public works, city councils, sometimes even transportation or planning groups, whatever the trail, whatever department that trail might fall under. It's a really long-lasting relationship. Once we build the trail, we continue to help, even though the cities are leading it. And so that's just important to note when we're talking about what we provide as an organization. And so we can do pretty much anything that your group needs to get a trail on the ground. This is some of the things that we do kind of for different groups. If you don't need our help, we are happy to stand on the sidelines and sing your praises and promote your work. But if you do need help, and we find a lot of our larger municipalities that are kind of strapped for resources really can use our help, or really small municipalities that have really small staffs, they often need us to be with them every step of the way. And so we really act as the workhorse behind the scenes to get these things on the ground. And while we can do all sorts of things for a community, where we really shine is in land acquisition and fundraising. And so as a land trust, we obviously have a lot of experience acquiring land. Oftentimes our projects require us working with a lot of different landowners. A mile of trail could have upwards of 8 different landowners that we're having to deal with. And so what we have done is act as the group that acquires the land on behalf of the city. So we actually acquired it as a land trust. We'll cobble it all together. And we'll do all of the due diligence and negotiations and the legal work to be able to acquire that land. Then we package it up and transfer it to a city in one document. And that just really makes it a less cumbersome process for a city to take on this new land. And so that's something that we really shine at. But obviously fundraising is another big hurdle that a lot of different groups experience. And so we come and walk beside you on that as well. And so we have been very creative in the way we have cobbled together funding for trails. Our bread and butter over the last 8 or 9 years has really been Department of Transportation grants. This has just been the most helpful source in our community. It might differ from yours, but I would definitely recommend looking into it. It is a federal matching program, so 80% of the grant would be covered by the federal level, and then 20% would have to be matched locally. And what we do is we not only help a city or group get that 20% local match, but we also can help write grants on behalf of a city that the city then applies for, but we do a lot of the work behind the scenes to get that application ready. The 2 major ones that we focused on is CMAQ and TAP. These are both programs that are meant to reduce congestion and air pollution. CMAQ is the most helpful for us. It's larger quantities of money that can take you through the whole process from land acquisition, due diligence, design, and construction. Those are very competitive, so we work very closely with our MPO, our Metropolitan Planning Organization, who is the one who allocates those funds. We tell them about our project and we talk with them about ways that we can make sure that our application is the most competitive, so we're more likely to receive those funds. TAP grants, we do the same thing. Those are smaller amounts of funding that normally are for shovel-ready projects. So you'll have to have other sources of funding available traditionally to get these funds, but they can be a really helpful tool to push a project over the edge. And then we were also very lucky to get a Tiger grant. It's now called Build. Within each administration, the name changes a little bit, but these are really meant to be network-wide projects. So they're very large quantities. We received $10 million to build out about 19 miles of trails, and that was a big game changer for us when we were first starting out. We have also been very successful with EPA brownfield and planning grants. Again, I can't overemphasize how important relationships are. We have a very close relationship with our region's grant department at EPA, and they're able to help us identify potential sources of funding and then advocate for our application. We are an industrial area, Birmingham, and so we have a lot of brownfields, a lot of rail lines, and so these brownfield grants has helped us get through that big hurdle of due diligence at the beginning of a project that can also often be a project stopper if you don't really have a way to pay for those that due diligence. We also have been very successful in working with FEMA. A lot of our trails, because we're interested in freshwater and helping people understand aquatic environments better, we've really targeted floodplains. And so we've worked a lot with FEMA to help move communities out of floodplains. So we'll do flood buyouts and repurpose areas that were prone to flooding from residential to outdoor recreational spaces, so parks and trails. And what that does is really change the narrative of that riparian corridor. It's no longer a burden to a city, but it becomes a great asset. And so we've been really successful using the flood buyout program. We also have worked with the National Park Service, and we are looking at ways to negotiate or work with HUD and the LWCF. Again, all these programs have been programs that have been very helpful for other cities. A lot of it depends on your relationship with your local entity that allocates the funds. And we are still working on some of those relationships and making sure that our projects can be seen as a benefit. But housing and the LWCF, which was recently kind of confirmed again through Congress, are great funding opportunities for recreational assets like this. And then when we talk about how we get that local match, we do a lot of work with local foundations and corporations. But one thing that sets us apart from some of our different groups in the region is that we are very open-minded about who we partner with. As an industrial area, we have a lot of heavy industry corporations who are based here and would like to do community projects. They aren't traditionally seen as environmental groups or environmental advocates, but we have found that our power companies, our gas companies, our big, large quarries have been huge champions of a lot of our projects and have helped us get that 20% match. And so when we're looking at groups that we can partner with and how we can really push these projects over the edge, we have been very creative and very, very open-minded about who we're willing to partner with. We will talk to anybody about a project, and we will entertain most ideas if it fits with our mission. And so I do recommend people to think outside of the box of some of the different groups that might be in your community that have been overlooked as advocates for green space, because they could be a game changer for your project. And if you guys have any questions, we have there's not a lot of time to talk about all the different ways that we've funded things, but I'm happy to talk through the process that we use. And again, I just advocate being creative, thinking outside of the box, and being open to new opportunities, and to reach out to people, even if you don't know them, because they could be a great advocate for you. And that is all.
Thank you. That was great. I love of partnerships. There seem to be many more of them once you get into linear parks, right? They're all up and down. So thank you for a good case study. Jonathan, you're up next.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Jonathan Pacheco Bell from the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust. We're a nonprofit community land trust that was formed in 2002 to address the critical lack of green space in communities of color in LA. We began originally within LA City and focusing our work within city limits, but we have since then expanded to countywide. So we pretty much go to LA County wherever communities of color need green space. In our 18 years, we have proudly developed 29 parks and gardens, adding 13 acres of green space to LA County and providing 400,000 Angelinos park access within a 10-minute walk from home. Our mission is to contribute to the equity and well-being of our neighborhoods through the development of parks, gardens, and community-driven organizing. The Neighborhood Land Trust develops parks and gardens exclusively in communities of color in LA. These are our community members. This is who we're fighting for. We partner with these residents and these families to create access to nature, green space, shade, recreation, and healthy food systems in their neighborhood. And we do this work to ensure that these children here and children all over LA County inherit a sustainable future Los Angeles. We develop parks and gardens through a unique community development model that engages residents every step of the way. It begins with authentic, consistent engagement where we are in constant dialogue with our community members. That moves into organizing, and we do that primarily through our Park Equity Leadership Academy. It's an 8-week training where we train our residents how to be green space advocates for their neighborhood. We're always looking to acquire parcels and convert them into green spaces. And our approach includes educating our residents how to identify and refer parcels to us. So parcels in your neighborhood, vacant lots, keep an eye on it and refer to us when you see it. With equity as a driver, this is what we look for in those vacant lots. We look for vacant lots that are approximately 12,000 square feet, exclusively in communities of color with a median household income of about $35,000 or less, and a low parks per 1,000 people ratio according to the California State Parks Community Fact Finder public database. Upon acquiring parcels, we move into our participatory design processes where community members come together to envision their park space. And when that's completed, we as the developer plan and manage park building and construction. Through our engagement, we learn from our residents what kind of programs they desire, and we ensure these programs are part of the parks when they open. In our community engagement model, community members are trained to be park stewards. That means our stewards open and close the parks. They serve as the first point of contact for park visitors. They are a constant presence in the parks. They sort of provide eyes on the space. They organize meetings about the parks and the neighborhoods and so much more. And key point, our park stewards are paid part-time employees of the Neighborhood Land Trust. So we bring job creation with our green spaces. Of course, funding is key to bringing our work into the world. So we'd like to share with you the mix of funding that we draw from to create our work. Local streams include taxpayer-supported initiatives, such as propositions and measures that are used to carry out green space development. So locally, LA City, we have Prop K, and LA County, we have what we call the WHAM measures, 4 different measures that allow green space development. Local also includes implementation of developer fees to build parks, and we're going to talk about that in a moment when we get to the state. State streams include taxpayer-supported initiatives. For example, California funds parks through the voter-approved Proposition 68, as well as green space development through the voter-approved marijuana tax in Proposition 64. And California's Quimby Act serves as enabling legislation that allows cities and counties on the local level to require market rate housing developers to either dedicate land for parks or pay those in lieu developer fees to build parks in neighborhoods. Federal streams for green space include CDBG funds and conservation financing through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. My colleague Carolyn just mentioned that in her presentation. Foundations are crucial funding streams for us at the Neighborhood Land Trust, and we highly recommend you reach out to foundations that are close to you, as well as national foundations. Foundations will believe in your work, And those show that by supporting you with funding. These are some of the foundations that support us. We're proud to partner with them. But also we recommend that you engage businesses that support you and will offer funding. And keep in mind businesses of different scales. So large corporations, but also online retailers and local businesses, and even sort of like the mom and pop shops. And please don't forget small donors. For this, we're talking individuals, families, allies, even friends and relatives. This is a way to encourage grassroots support for your work. And finally, an annual fundraiser is a fantastic way to engage both existing funders and new funders. This year, because of the pandemic, we had to move our annual garden party fundraiser online. We had it last month, and I am proud to tell everyone here on our webinar today that we were still able to raise about $99,000 to support our mission through our online garden party fundraiser. Check into those online fundraisers, check into those annual fundraisers to support your work. And as you can see, none of our work here is ever done in isolation. It is always done in partnerships. So we want to uplift the importance of forming partnerships to create green spaces. We believe this will help you too. When thinking of partnerships, look to these three possibilities. Community involves residents of all ages, families, schools, local businesses. Coalitions includes allied community-based organizations and allied mission-driven groups. Government includes local, state, and federal. And also remember that you'll be reaching out to both elected offices and departments. For example, it's a very good idea to form a strong partnership with your local Parks and Recreation department. And that could lead to several tangible benefits. As an example, expedited review of potential projects for consistency with park master plans, support for green spaces just going forward in their jurisdiction, early agreement on operations and maintenance and programming, and positive references for future grant applications and RFPs. I'd like to tell you about our most recently opened green space. December 2019, we opened Golden Age Park in the Westlake MacArthur Park area of central LA. This parcel was a long abandoned, blighted vacant lot you can see here on your screen. We acquired it through the county's tax default process. This is something that we also recommend to everybody here. When property owners stop paying their property taxes, it gets defaulted back to county ownership. And the county in Los Angeles has the ability to partner with folks like the Neighborhood Land Trust to provide access to their GIS database. So we're able to go into the tax default database and actually search for and find defaulted properties. We recommend everybody look into the ability to do that locally too. This is a dense, low-income neighborhood with a very high population of seniors. The community development process for this park included several participatory design meetings where our community members got together to identify their priorities. This included activities such as sketch and mapping amenities exercises. We provided an intergenerational activity survey. We used dot maps on amenity boards. There were ceramics and drawing workshops. And key point to note that the conversations throughout these meetings took place in the language of the community. So the conversations were in English and Spanish and Korean and Tagalog. We also partnered with UCLA researchers who provided us design guidelines. You can see here on your screen. And these helped us create this very senior-friendly park for this particular community with a high population of seniors. So some of the design elements included soft walking paths, stumble-proof flat surfaces, and raised garden beds, which were all designed with senior citizens in mind. So today, Golden Age Park provides people access to green space within a 10-minute walk in this very highly urbanized neighborhood. And that blighted vacant lot is gone. Golden Age Park came together through a mix of funding, and we want to highlight that. 4 different foundations, CDBG funds, as well as county taxpayer supported funding. As we close, we want to acknowledge that 2020 has been a difficult year for the Neighborhood Land Trust like no other. These are the challenges we face as we enter 2021. First of all, COVID-19 has impacted everything. Everything has changed. The biggest impact has been the ill health that it has brought for so many people close to us: friends, family, park users, community members. So this is something that we're certainly going to be taking on as we enter the new year. As a result of the pandemic, decreased and redirected funding has really directed and impacted our mission, and it's forcing us to adapt and evolve in real time. There have also been fewer folks at parks these days. Social distancing imperatives have made it more challenging for people to visit parks for active use. And this is unfortunately happening at a time when open space is more important than ever. Meanwhile, real estate costs continue to rise, both in Los Angeles and beyond. And that means some of the parcels of interest to us are now too expensive to acquire. And the result is fewer opportunities for us to develop green spaces through our unique approach and community-driven process. And finally, we're conscious of concerns over green gentrification and displacement that come with new park development. To address those concerns, we're partnering with our various coalition allies to create policies and demonstration projects that show how parks and gardens can be developed without upending the neighborhood. And to support that, we've provided an example displacement avoidance policy from LA County as a takeaway item for this webinar. That is it for me right now, but I look forward to our Q&A and our very lively discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. That was great. Particularly, you're covering some really good ideas around community engagement. We're going to move into audience Q&A. While the speakers have been presenting, we've gotten a number of questions that have come in over the chat box. And so I'm going to kick off with, sometimes I'm going to aggregate some of these questions together. So let's build on the community engagement issue. Everyone talked about it. You all talked about how important it is to your work. I wonder if you could maybe take a couple turns and talk a little bit more specifically about how you're doing it. And in particular, people are asking about what they're calling authentic engagement strategies to reach audiences that are hard to reach, low-income communities of color, how to really make sure you're reaching everyone who needs to be reached in an as inclusive way as possible. Maybe you guys in Cleveland want to start, and we'll just go across the screen.
Absolutely. So for us, we were really fortunate through the generous support of the St. Luke's Foundation. We've created a project area in the southeastern part of the city that is considered some of the more distressed and historically marginalized areas. So this support and funding has allowed us to hire a staff specifically located in that neighborhood footprint. These are people that live and work in that neighborhood on a daily basis, and we've created a program area that really went from a needs assessment on what the residents were looking for and combining the data that we're able to get as a land trust, but really having someone on the ground. We've been working on that project now for 6 years, and we don't just jump around from project to project. We're really committed to those 3 neighborhoods, and we've been really fortunate to have the funding that has allowed us to do that.
Carolyn, do you want to talk about Birmingham?
Yeah, so we are a very small staff, and so we really require partnering with other organizations that are already working in the community. So whether that be neighborhood associations, church groups, or different walking groups, we work with people who are from that area to identify the leaders in the group, and then they help kind of guide us on how best to engage those communities. We've done everything from going door to door, sending out flyers, to hosting potlucks, all sorts of things that we can do to try to bring in folks and get their feedback. But we do really rely on people from the community to help guide us and really make sure that we're tapping all the different groups. We never get full participation from a community. That's kind of the dream we keep chasing, but we've done pretty well in getting a pretty good cross-section of the community.
Jonathan?
Yes, so in the pre-COVID world and what we're now seeing in the COVID world, I think our authentic community engagement looks the same. in that we strive to have those close proximate relationships with our community members. So in the pre-COVID world, not only would we organize and put forth and set up and administer the community meetings for our parks, for our park creation, we would embed ourselves in as many community meetings as possible. So whether it was in neighborhood council meetings or church groups or any other type of meeting, you would, or like community festivals, right? You would always find the neighborhood land trust. We were trying to basically be everywhere and meet people on the ground. We also do our authentic community engagement through our Park Equity Leadership Academy. That has changed a bit in the COVID era because that was exclusively designed to be very much in person and with close proximity. But it's an 8-week training that shows people how to be a park advocate for their neighborhood. We were happy to discuss that in more detail in terms of the curriculum and the approach. In the post-COVID world, we are continuing to meet face-to-face. We will be doing our first community engagement very soon, this month, where we're going to be out there at one of our parks. And the key difference is that we'll be in full PPE, personal protective equipment, face masks, gloves, visors, but still doing face-to-face engagement to really try to capture that perspective from the neighborhood on how to improve a particular park that we're submitting for Prop 68 funds for renovation.
Let's build on community engagement a little bit. We talk about it a lot, certainly at the beginning of a project, to get feedback on what should be done and how things should be designed. But long-term, there's stewardship. There's how to manage that property over time. There have been a number of questions that point to how do you as an organization weigh the extent of your long-term role? And that includes taking on responsibility and liabilities in certain cases. I think one of our questioners said they were stymied from taking title to a property because it was perceived to be too much of a risk for the organization. So how do you think about that? And then how do you maybe mitigate some of that risk with your partnerships and your community engagement? And Carolyn, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, so we do not own or maintain any of the projects that we work on. So we're a bit of an outlier in that way, but we do have very strong relationships with all the cities. We think about long-term maintenance and establishing funds early on in the project to try to make sure that we're not building something that can't be maintained, especially considering administration changes and making sure whatever we're doing can survive any shakeups down the line. So we're really strategic about how we develop things, and we learned that unfortunately through experience that we built something that wasn't able to be maintained long term, and so we've had to shift the way we plan for projects. But in terms of liability, we don't own them, cities do, and so I can't necessarily speak to that.
How about you guys in Cleveland? Isaac, you need to unmute.
Sorry about that. So we're fortunate that with our team in Cleveland, we have a stewardship team of 4 full-time people that steward a lot of our conservation easements and properties that we have. In our urban area, for our Reforest Our City initiative, we have a seasonal tree crew that we hire for local residents to make sure all of our trees are being watered. And then the Brighton Park example, I think, is really germane to this. We also felt the need, both from a liability standpoint, again, taking on a 25-acre landfill, our board wasn't exactly thrilled about this. So we created a separate LLC that we hold the property in to minimize that liability. And as someone mentioned in the chat, there aren't a lot of public dollars to create maintenance or management endowments. So we rely on public funding, both for the acquisition and remediation, and try and shift our private funds to an endowment for the maintenance. So we're really lucky to partner with Cleveland Metro Parks, like I said, and we were able to fundraise dollars to transfer directly to them on an ongoing maintenance and management agreement over a period of 10 years. And then after that 10th year, they will take on responsibility down the line. So it was win-win for everybody.
Jonathan.
Regarding our approach to acquisitions and parcel management and potential liabilities, I think it's important for me at this point to kind of refer back to those partnerships, those strong partnerships that we recommend with the Parks and Rec Department. In those early conversations that you can have about park development, one thing that can be determined is whether or not the land trust, us, are going to own and operate and do basically everything once the park opens, and it'll just be sort of like solely a land trust park, or if the facility will be transferred back to the local Parks and Rec. It comes down to the particular park space and the facility and the needs and the wants of that department and the particularities of that space. But it's good to know ahead of time who is going to potentially take on some of the liabilities, and whether or not it'll be solely the land trust or it'll be a shared responsibility with the local Parks and Rec Department. We have that locally here. We have some parks where we're everything, we do it all, and our park stewards are community members who we pay to be there and to be the leader. They really function as the all-purpose sort of eyes and ears on the ground. And we have other models where we have the facility transferred back to Parks and Rec. So that is a good thing to do up front to determine who's going to be taking on that liability and that potential leadership. And I also wanted to point out, as my colleague Isaac mentioned, funding is key. For us, we channel in all streams of funding to get this done. So public, private, foundations, everything that you can do, and piece it all together to make this happen. This is something that we want to really double down on and recommend for everybody.
So there have been a number of other questions. It's sort of like people are out there discovering land trusts. Oh my God, these guys are great. So a lot of questions about how do we find land trusts? How do they get started? How do we start one in our community? Maybe Jonathan, you can talk a little bit about the beginning of the LA Neighborhood Land Trust, how it got started, who was there at the table, where your funding came from to get started.
Sure, happy to talk about that. We were formed in 2002 after extensive conversations that were happening in the city of Los Angeles, when it was realized that there was a critical lack of green space in our communities of color here in LA. Then Council Member Garcetti, now Mayor Garcetti, was really in the lead. A committee was put together that studied the issue and issued a report, and I am happy to share that after the fact with anybody. We have that in PDF ready to go. But one of the recommendations from that committee was to create a nonprofit neighborhood land trust that will be responsible for bringing green spaces about in communities of color in LA. That's our origin story. And since 2002, we've expanded beyond just LA City, but we've gone really countywide. So now we have green spaces in the unincorporated areas, which are many in LA County, as well as other cities. And as I said in the presentation, we will go wherever communities of color need green space, and we are always looking to form new partnerships. If anybody here would like to learn more about how to form land trusts, we can certainly talk about it and connect you with other community land trusts that are in this space in LA.
Carolyn, you might be the best one to answer this question, to start talking a little bit about how land trusts fund their operating costs. The way you described a lot of your work, you're providing services, and there's grant money out there for acquisition and design, but how do you pay for the operating costs of the land trust?
We roll that into the grants that we are applying for, and so we do not charge for our services in terms of developing trails. We are known for being the drivers behind this. We have very close relationships with our foundations, with our corporate partners, and we're starting to build up our individual donor base as people start realizing that we're really the workhorse that's getting these projects on the ground. But it really has been a model of when we apply for grant funding, we also are covering our costs for operation as we apply for those. So it means more grants that we write, but we're able to kind of do two things with the same grant.
I want to try to string together a few questions here that have to do with real estate and the land acquisition process. So one of the simple questions was, what's a takeout partner? How long is the land acquisition process? And are there special requirements in putting easements on property around community engagement? So let's go back to Cleveland and see if you guys might answer a few of those questions.
Yeah, so let me get this straight. So first was how long it takes?
Well, what's a takeout partner? And then how long does it take?
Takeout partner, yeah, a takeout partner is whoever is involved in the long-term ownership and management of it. So as mentioned, we've protected over 60,000 acres, but we do not own 60,000 acres. We use park districts. In the case of the Brighton Park example, there is no takeout partner. The Land Conservancy is actually owning those 25 acres in perpetuity. We just entered into a management agreement with Metro Parks, but usually we will transfer fee title of a property to a takeout partner like a park district. How long does a project take? I can let Kelly weigh in on this. I mean, if we had an endowment of $30 million that we could go out and acquire property and then fundraise for on the back end, we could get it done really quickly. But we're not dealing with sort of the house flipping model here. So sometimes it can take as little as 6 months to acquire a property after going through due diligence. I would say that's pretty aggressive. On average, maybe it's 12 months, and some of our projects take years. Brighton Park, from the beginning of negotiations to actually closing, was definitely a multi-year project. And then your third question on public engagement
and easements, whether the easement process, you putting an easement on property, transferring title to a public agency, are there special engagement requirements when you do that?
If I'm understanding that correctly, there's not any public engagement requirements. Where the legal requirements come in is that we cannot provide public benefits for our transactional work. So we need to make sure that if someone is donating a piece of property to us as a conservation organization, we're not transferring it to a private developer that's seeing that private benefit. But as far as engagement around putting easements on, and Kelly, correct me if I'm misspeaking here, but I don't know of any legal requirements for public engagement on conservation easements. Obviously, with some of our funding, public funding, townships, or if it's going into conservation, it's diminishing the tax base for that taxing district. So sometimes local governments have a say on how much land they're losing off their tax rolls. So we need to negotiate that, but not public engagement. And I think the way that, Jonathan is talking about his type of public engagement.
Got about a minute left, and I'm going to throw the last question at Jonathan. Again, kind of a couple of questions. You talked about green gentrification, and people sort of want to know how do you deal with that. But related to that, how in low-income communities can you create partnerships with developers that maybe are partial developments that kind of solve two problems at once, maybe housing, job creation, parks, and managing that gentrification issue?
Thank you for that. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for me to mention one of our core partnerships, that is the Los Angeles, get the name right for everyone. La Rosa is what we call it, the Los Angeles Regional Open Space and Affordable Housing Collaborative. I'll say it again, Los Angeles Regional Open Space and Affordable Housing Collaborative, or we call it La Rosa. This is a partnership that brings together affordable housing community land trust, so Trust South LA here locally, parks leaders, Neighborhood Land Trust, and Trust for Public Land, justice organizations like Southeast Asian Community Alliance, NRDC for our legal expertise. We are working together to form new approaches and to recommend policies and to create demonstration projects that show that you can do affordable housing and green space without gentrifying a neighborhood. The first thing that we have that's something that is
Jonathan.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off. You gave him a good lead and a good connection, and I'm going to suggest that people who care about that issue are going to be able to reach out to Jonathan. So I'm going to have to cut us short. It's been a great discussion.
Displacement avoidance policy we provided.
Thank you. So that was our last question. Again, thank you very much. You guys are doing great work, great information. For those listening, please visit the events tab on the cityparksalliance.org website for information about future webinars. If you have additional questions, here's the contact information. Each one of them would be willing to talk to you more about many of the questions that we didn't get to today. So please reach out to them. I mean, part of the value of City Parks Alliance is that you're part of a network. These are your colleagues that want to help you. Once again, thanks to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for their sponsorship of the 2020 funding webinar series. A reminder, I think you all know, City Parks Alliance has had to postpone its 2021 Greater and Greener Conference in Philadelphia. It's been moved to Philly in the summer of 2022. However, City Parks Alliance will be hosting a virtual summer series in 2021 with educational sessions, networking. It's kind of a prelude to that 2022 conference. Stay tuned, there'll be more information on the website. Within 48 hours, you'll receive an email with links to today's recording, related resources, instructions on how to claim your continuing education credits for AICP and LACES. Thanks to all of you, our attendees, our speakers, you're all terrific. You're doing great work. Thanks for being with us. Take a minute to fill out the short evaluation that will pop up after the session concludes. Keep up the great work. Take it easy.